Greetings, 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 everyone. It's so good to be back with you. It's so good to be on again with Dr. Niyana, Rasayon. It's so good to have him continue with what he did last month, the first part of his lecture series on womb to the tomb. And I hope that some of you have reviewed it. I think, there's a lot of stuff on there, a lot of stuff to know, a lot of stuff to maintain in the memory. But it's good if you can review it, not just once, but twice, or use it as reference. Good stuff, good stuff. And Dr. Rasayon is with us again this evening, and he's got some more for us, some more for you to take into the mind, because this is about the mind. He's from the womb to the tomb. It's all about what affects our mind as a people and how we should act when we're getting those messages, those telepathic messages, maybe, how to deal with it, how to deal with ourselves, with one another, as a people. It's all in the name of getting to that point where we're unified to act in our own or for our own benefit. So, okay, what I'm going to do now, folks, is begin with the usual way in which we do, which is the ritual opening for our programs in the UNIA-ACL RC2020. We must go in that direction because we want people to understand or to be aware, for those who are not, or for the first time, is coming into contact with what we're doing, the RC2020, or with the Freedom Friday Forum. This is the official pledge, the flag. The flag meaning the red, black, and which was brought to us by the ancestors in 1920, introduced as that emblem for all Black folks, for all Africans everywhere. The red, black, and green. There's a lot of people flying it around and don't know why. They're saying it's black flag. There's all kinds of names they put on it. But I want you to understand that flag is the flag of the UNIA. And while we don't mind other people waving it around and using it as their flag for whatever organization, we want you to know it is the UNIA flag, but it belongs to everyone of African descent. All right. And this is our pledge to that flag. I commit my body, mind, and spirit to the protection, defense, and security of the red, black, and green. I dedicate my life to the redemption of Mother Africa and the liberation of the scattered Black children. I accept for myself and my descendants the teachings of universal African nationalism, and I promise that our children will be instilled with the purpose and knowledge of themselves as African people, in order that the cause of our struggle will neither falter nor fail, until all Black people are free and united through one God, one aim, one destiny. Also, we must remind you, those of you who are members of the UNIA, as well as African people, and as well as those who support the cause, that we are not operating in some harem, scarum kind of way. We have a constitution, and that constitution was promulgated by our ancestors in 1920 at a convention in New York. And that preamble to the Constitution is what I'm going to recite to you right now, because there are a lot of people who don't understand who we are, what we're about, what's our purpose. So here we go. The Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League is a social, friendly, humanitarian, charitable, educational, institutional, constructive, and expansive society, and is founded by persons desiring to the utmost to work for the general uplift of the Negro peoples of the world. And the members pledge themselves to do all in their power, conserve the rights of their noble race, and to respect the rights of all mankind, believing always in the brotherhood of man and the fatherhood of God. The motto of the organization is one God, one aim, one destiny. Therefore, let justice be done to all mankind, realizing that if the strong oppresses the weak, confusion and discontent will ever mark the path of man. But with love, faith, and charity towards all, the reign of peace and plenty will be heralded into the world, and the generations of man shall be called blessed. And there it is. That is the preamble to the Constitution. There's some things I would love to go into right now, but let's face it, we have, Dr. Coe has a lot of things for us here tonight, and we don't want to infringe on his time. During the last presentation, he did say who or what and what he's about. And Dr. Coker, I'm going to ask you to just make that brief, because we have a long history of you, a long
Yes, sir.
curriculum vitae here.
Oh, no, sir.
About you, but we're not gonna so I'll let you just paraphrase it for us, and so we can get along. So I will introduce you to now, our good brother, our presenter for tonight, Dr. Coco.
Hotel people,
Dr. Cole. Yes.
I'm thinking I have audio, do I not?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Are there any among you over 60 on the platform at this time?
Yes, indeed.
Well, I'm asking you for permission to continue speaking.
You have permission.
Thank you, Asante Sana. Well, the summary in a nutshell is I'm literally an extension of you in terms of the formalized quote unquote training that comes from institutions of quote unquote higher learning in the United States of America. All of them were HBCUs, starting from North Carolina A&T to Fisk University, Meharry Medical College, and then Howard University. By training, I'm a behavioral neuroscientist. That, in a nutshell, that means that my specialty is brain-behavior relationships. Literally, how does the brain work, and what kinds of experiences impact the brain to allow it to work in a manner that's not optimal, and in a manner that is basically other than optimal, which means maladaptive behaviors. I'm also a percussionist, and I'm a parent. And it is my pleasure to be an instrument to share my 2 cents worth with you regarding the theme for this evening, from the womb to the tomb. It should be from the womb to the tomb and beyond, but you'll see that momentarily as we engage in it. That's a synopsis of who my person is by training.
Thank
So
you, sir.
should I indulge now?
Yes, sir. Please.
Okay, I want to thank the organization for always allowing me to come in and share my perspective with the community. But more importantly, when you see the UNIA, you need to be mindful of the fact that though that's the organization's name, with the word Negro in it, Negra actually really means black. And Garvey was so much far ahead of his time. I wouldn't even say by decades, I would say generations ahead of his time in terms of the brother being a basic social culture engineer and being a brother with island roots, but sees in Africa and socialize in America with American fruits, as a colleague of mine would say from the West Coast, Baba Way Nobles. I just want to give my props to the Garvey family and all their ancestors plugged into the Garvey lineage, because we would not be having these kinds of exchanges with the community if it was not for the lineage of Brother Marcus Mosiah Garvey. So I want you to know that I am absolutely honored and feel privileged to be able to engage the community on a platform that's dedicated to the upliftment of melanin dominant people throughout the planet. Now, having stated that, let's take this dive into the subject matter. You'll note that there's the Ankh there. Oftentimes I go online to salvage whatever is most representative of what we need to address when we're talking about this quote unquote from the womb to the tomb. And remember, we're going to go beyond. At the very top of the Ankh, where you see the entrance or the symbol for the portal to heaven, which represents the yoni or the vaginal vault of a human female. And then you see the extended arms on the Ankh representing the umbrella where the fallopian tubes would drop down here. And this would represent the tunnel or the pathway to heaven, indicative of a male's phallus, to bring forth the fruit from heaven, i.e. the statement that Dr. Yusuf Ben Yochanan used to always say, babies are made in heaven, and this is the portal to heaven. And this heaven is when you invite a spirit to the earth plane.
I see.
So as you can see, as I shared the previous title, I said there's more. I want you to know that this is a European myth, from the womb to the tomb. It's a European myth. And we're going to expand on that momentarily, from the womb to the tomb, because that implies that from the womb you have come. And then after you leave the womb, after you've lived the cycle for the physical body that you have, lived actually means you've experienced in the realm of where people incarnate or where babies come on the planet. Then you basically become entombed and shrined back to the earth. But it goes so far beyond that, because the fact of the matter is energy cannot be created and it cannot be destroyed. It only changes form. And your African brothers and sisters were always aware of that, or your Nubian brothers, or your brothers that were occupying the banks of the Nile and Kush, the Dravidian brothers, throughout the entire planet, where there were melanin dominant people, as the last Porsche used to say, before the white man came. And the irony of before the quote unquote white man came, they were not even referred to as white men. They were referred to as a few other titles, which I will not touch at the moment. That's the reason why I refer to them collectively as vanilla brothers and sisters, though I personally believe that they are a hybridized version from having resided in the Caucasus Mountains for so long. I know what I'm saying is going to be polarizing and probably engage some people into a spectrum of emotions, but the truth always evokes emotions when they come from melanin dominant people. So let's be mindful of that. So this is the slide that the brothers created on the left when they had from the womb to the tomb, how the brain works, and the one on the right that you see, womb to the tomb, part 2. And I'm absolutely just incredibly pleased with whoever put these graphics together, because on your far right, you see the little baby being extended to the heavens down here, if you can see my cursor moving. Some people here are probably mindful of that from looking at Kunta Kinte being raised up when he was born in a Roots series that was on American television as a sitcom from the 70s, and then they did a peekaboo into the 80s. And the essence of what was the only thing that's greater than you is the divine order of the universe, i.e., or Allah, which actually means all in all for people that are wrapped up into Christianity and may not understand that classic Islam related to the Quran is literally tied to some things that are kind of, I don't want to say stolen, but taken out of context, and the traditional beliefs by most Christians to not realize that the Quran actually acknowledges those things that Westerns refer to as Christianity. Why is this important? In a couple of moments to be very clear. So you see highlighted here, you see Sasa, and on the right you see Zamani. Sasa, these are key Swahili terms. I'm going to define them for you in the next slides coming up. But for the moment, I want you to take note that they are literally embedded in the universe. On the left, you see the universe of the immediate time that you live in, all right? That's going to be your hard drive, but more specifically, the RAM that's integrating or exchanging information on the hard drive on your computer. Zamani is going to be your ancestral memories that are buried so deeply inside of you that you may not even be able to recall them consciously, but they are alive in your DNA. And I want to be clear about that. They are alive in your DNA. It's almost like you have created a file, but you've forgotten how to open that file because you've lost the password, or maybe you thought your computer crashed and information is gone, but it's still there. It's buried in your cellular network. So that's Zamani. And in between the time that you have currently in life, i.e., your conscious memory, what you're engaging in, is what Europeans have actually built on that was really developed by African people, the internet. And I mean that literally. And maybe before we leave, I'll share with you some of the brilliant minds behind developing the internet. So I want you to know that if you look carefully, you'll see something that look like little particles or clusters of light. And we're talking about space, and the internet literally is covering this planet in so many ways that we refer to it as the World Wide Web. So I'm about to remind you that the way you align with your ancestors and tune into your Zamani or your ancestral spirits and your energy is we do these things through rituals and oracles. But we've been so well trained in America that we've forgotten what our rituals are. And some of us look upon oracles as if they're defying some fundamental rules that are built into classic Christianity. And so we don't engage in those rituals anymore. In so many words, we've forgotten how to talk or communicate with our ancestors. And that's the reason why I started off sharing with you that it's beyond the womb to the tomb, all right? Because that's the European interpretation. And in a few moments, I'm going to reiterate the profound significance of how these things program the brain, how they literally create a pseudo disconnect from our children, oftentimes with the technology, and more importantly, with us trying to navigate a system that by its very nature is designed to make us literally disconnect from our brain being connected to everything in the known universe. And at any point in time, as we engage in this subject matter this evening, I would encourage people that may have really serious comments or questions to make a note and or put it in the chat so they do not get away. They don't just float off into space. But I want to thank the people that created these actual flyers for the presentations that my person is allowed to share with you. And I also want to reiterate to you the profound significance of our children. So here is the slide that reminds you of what I was telling you about embracing your story and aligning with your ancestors. Is the true meaning of being woke. You hear about woke here, woke there, but if you are not woke, if you're not aware that your ancestors are perpetually present around you, it's almost like you're going into a stadium filled with thousands and thousands of spirits in your lineage, but you've forgotten their names or you don't know their names. So when you go in and try and communicate with them, they have a very unique kind of esoteric level of respect for bloodlines and lineages and families. So if you do not know how to call upon them, and if you do not know their names or what rituals that will appeal to allowing them to engage you in a level of consciousness, which sometimes comes in your dreams, it doesn't mean they didn't hear you. It's almost like the super intelligence of the universe. If you were at a family reunion and all of your aunts and uncles were there, let's say you had about 120 people at the family reunion, and let's say maybe 35 of those people were elders. You're just not able to go there and say, hey, you. They need to know who you're talking to. And the way you speak to them literally oftentimes is guided by rituals and oracles. Now, this is going to be extremely important because I just shared with you about memories and RAM, the memory that you have online, which is what you are aware of, and then Zamani, and these are Kiswahili or Swahili terms. And this has to do with the time that I just mentioned to you earlier, the things that you may have forgotten. Hence, I highlighted for you here, memory stuck in your hard drive. You no longer know how to open, express yet covert genetic memories. I'm telling you, they are there and they impact your life in ways that you may not even consciously realize because oftentimes they do so in such a subtle manner, but it's always powerful that you are allowed to create the illusion in your life thinking that you completely, totally have free will. But when you come on the planet as a baby, Babi means the spirit has manifest. You come on the planet with a mission. You come on the planet with a purpose. But European reorganizing how we navigate life has truncated or closed or taken those memories offline. And some of us are still struggling to how we should go about living to reconnect with those memories. And this is why I put this slide here, because this slide tells a story. Now, I know a lot of you clearly have to be familiar with the IFA or the IFE. I'm assuming that everyone here is familiar with the IFE or the IFA, correct? Are you not? Does the silence mean everybody's familiar with IFE?
Yes,
The cowrie
Baba.
shells? Okay.
Yes.
So that's one of the classic African oracles that is used to actually create a communication line with your ancestors. But in America, if you are of a certain mindset or level of training that disconnected you from respecting that, you may think it's just some weird stuff that people from the bush might do, or something that quote unquote Africans that are so-called quote unquote uncivilized might do. But that is one of the most sophisticated computer systems in the history of this planet. So I'll just name a couple of more so we can take a dive into telling you what a human is. You see the I Ching. Everybody's familiar with the I Ching. They usually associate with your Asian brothers in China. And I know most people in America are familiar with the tarot. The runes oftentimes are used by some of your vanilla brothers and sisters. But contrary to what you may have been led to believe, all the Vikings were not looking like what you've seen in Hollywood. And most of us are familiar with astrology. Some of you are familiar with the kahunas from the Polynesian islands. Those are like the keepers of the archives of knowledge, like you would find a griot in continental Africa and many countries in Africa. But they're also a little bit more than a griot. They're also what you would associate with what's referred to oftentimes in South America or in the United States or Brazil, Venezuela as a shaman. But these people are a little bit more connected than that. They are a lot like the lady that was taking the people through the journey in the Matrix, and she was the wise one that knew where everything was. These people are the keepers of the Akashic records, are the records that allow you to take a deep dive into the real library. Now, at the very bottom, you see software. And that's what has allowed us to think that communicating with our ancestors is just some mumbo jumbo talk. It's not important. So we rely on software, neglecting this software that by nature we already have buried in our genes. We just need to learn how to awaken it. So let me remind you what a human is before I take this dive into explaining a few other things to you. You see human at the top left here, human. I made it gold deliberately because if you put melanin in an electron microscopy and you really magnified it, it would appear like not gold as you know, classic gold for making, for metallurgy or making jewelry, but a unique type of gold like a light, a radiant light of sun. And I'm talking about the human, because actually human means a shade of consciousness. So here's the breakdown of what a human is. Hydrocolloidal, pseudo-autonomous, sentient hydrocarbon, photobioelectromagnetic transducer, aerobic type, eumelanin dominant, fail a mixed fused melanin bipedal cerebral driven life form. I want to change the order of my platform so I can, I want to open my screen up a little differently. Well, I won't take the time to do that any more than what I've just done. Okay, so take note of what we're looking at here. And at the very top in your thoracic cavity, you see the oracles. You hear a lot of people throughout the world, they'll tell you, I felt that to my soul, or you really touched my heart when you did that, all right? This is where you have your respiration in your lungs, which you're inhaling and exhaling, which is obviously creating an intimate relationship with your heart. And your heart has an intimate relationship with your brain, because your brain is not going to be online if your heart stops making available a certain level of oxygen to it, and also certain surges amounts of glucose so that you can actually navigate and shuttle thoughts back and forth. We're going to get past the neurobiology in a second and start talking about how critically important it is for you to understand, and we talk about the womb to the tomb, how intimately this is tied to what we do with our children. But we need to get the science laid down first. Now, this is representing a neuron inside of your brain, all right? This is an electron, and this is a cluster of galaxies. If you didn't know it, you probably heard that statement before, as above, so below. So whatever is inside of you, believe it or not, is also external of you in the universe. And the irony of whatever is inside of you means you are part of the universe. But Europeans have literally led you to believe that when you are born, you are individual. And that has allowed us to allow a varying degrees of disconnect to take place with our children. You hear people saying that a lot. I don't know what's wrong with that boy. I don't know what's going on with that girl. I don't know what's wrong with these children today. Unfortunately, whether you are willing to acknowledge it or not, these children are an extension of you and how the environment has modified their ways of navigating the environment. And to the degree that we rely on an environment that is literally anti to their development, designed to undermine their development. And the more you allow them to roam freely, it's almost like having a person that is literally physically blind and not in a smart car drive you along 95, 295 or the freeway back and forth to places. So probability of you getting beyond the car being turned on in ignition and having an accident is very, very unlikely. What I'm getting at is all of these cells and all of these galaxies and the entire universe, you guys are in constant communication. But you are saturated with distractions, so you may not notice what's going on with your children, and you may not notice how the society has you distracted, because fundamental to you being distracted is you do not know how to nurture the neurons in your own body. And in a moment, I'm going to briefly touch on neuroplasticity, but I want you to know why I refer to you as a hydrocarbon-based photobioelectromagnetic transducer, aerobic type, eumelanin dominant, fail, or mixed fuse. And all those words you say, like, that sounds so complicated. I'm simply telling you that you are an electromagnetic being. And being an electromagnetic being, that means part of you is yang, other parts of you are yin, which means you are magnetic and electric simultaneously. Europeans have led you to believe that if you are, quote unquote, electric and magnetic simultaneously, they have the audacity to tell you those things translate into bisexuality. They don't translate into that. They translate into you having the ability to radiate energy and receive energy. Radiate means you can send off charges, and receive energy means you can pull in charges. And you need to be mindful of that, because we unfortunately are allowing the disconnect to continue to go on with our children. And believe it or not, if you don't believe it, you will see it as time goes on. Some of you are old enough to know that there was a time when melanin dominant people in any major city, their parents would literally allow the other people in the neighborhood to co-parent their children, which meant that if parent A, B, and C made an observation shared with parent D about their child, then the parent would inquire of the child, like, I heard blah, 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 blah about you. So what is that about? But today we're like, I'm minding my business, you mind your business, you stay in your lane, I'll stay in my lane. And so we don't have a community. And trust me, my vanilla brothers and sisters, particularly the administration in front of you now, they're just overt in your face. That does not mean that the previous administrations were not sort of more subtle behind your back, but they have a similar agenda. I'm going to take this dive into genetic memory, and then I'm going to try to see if we can have a couple of comments to redirect our focus so this will not come across like I'm just talking to you. This is the bottom line here. You have genetic memory. And when I drop it on you, citing some people that some of you are probably familiar with, it'll be so easily understood that you would recognize it. Now, I literally superimposed this cluster of genetic material here, DNA rather, to highlight how sophisticated your genetic material is. But if you notice here, it looks like it's kind of broken up here, like it's damaged. For the record, we have cultivated the ability to selectively modify your genetic material. And I'll touch on that in the ending parts of the lecture. We have developed technology that we can literally modify or alter you at a genetic level. We can do it in a very subtle way in society and learning, and we can do it in a direct way, literally before you come on the planet, i.e. like in utero. We can even go a step further. We can do it before you actually bring the gametes, i.e. the sperm and egg, together to create another human by tampering with your genetic memories. I know you guys are familiar with this sister, Dr. Joy LaGrue. I know you're familiar with her. I know you, I'm going to take you over to this slide so you can see her. Where's her stuff at? You see? Dr. Joy LaGrue, post-traumatic slave, Dr. Joy LaGrue. Now I want you to know, she dropped this book probably at least, what, 15 years ago maybe? And I want you to tune in to this. Look, this sister was talking about post-traumatic slavery syndrome being tied to what happened to you, to your great-great-grandparents. What happened to those of you that may have had members of your bloodline caught up in the Atlantic or the enslavement of your family tree, or members in your family tree. She's writing about it in detail. Now, you would think a neurobiologist would be writing about it, or a physician would be writing about it, or someone in my area would be writing about it. But she developed a detailed narrative to explain what happens to melanin dominant people as a result of post-traumatic slavery syndrome. Because some of us are still enslaved because we don't think for ourselves. So let me tell you how these things operate so that we can have some clarity on it. We won't be up in the air about it. It has to do with some big words that I'm going to drop on you. But for the record, I want to give you an anchor. Think about proteins first, and think about amino acids, which come together to make proteins. And think about when you're eating foods that allow your cells to develop properly, i.e. your musculature, your heart, your brain, you need amino acids to produce proteins. So you need proteins, all right? So I'm just giving you that as a foundation. So when we talk about proteins, we're literally setting the stage to talk to you about how DNA does what it does. So I'm going to read a couple of things highlighted for you, because I know a number of people that talk about epigenetics, but from my point of view, they know very little about it. So the epigenome, so we're going to have some perspective. We need to get these little words in our lexicon kind of anchored so we can have some perspective about things that we're discussing. Check this out. The epigenome sounds like a big word, right? But it's nothing other than chemical compounds that can tell the genome what to do. In other words, whatever your body is building on based upon your fundamental genetic signature comes from what you're putting in your body. And what you put in your body often is not always a choice. You can put things in your body when you decide to ride your bike from Anacostia northeast through the city, and you're doing it during rush hour in the summertime. So whatever's in the air, you're going to be inhaling that, all right? You can do it in a similar manner when you decide to run up to Burger King, McDonald's, and Taco Bell and eat whatever it is they're selling because you think that you just need to like nip your appetite in the bud, all right? So what you're putting in your body is going to impact what happens to you constitutionally. And those things impact the epigenome because the epigenome is made up of chemical compounds and proteins that can attach to your DNA. It's almost like someone jumping in an Uber and that Uber person wasn't there to pick you up, but you get in the particular Uber anyway, and then you start telling this person where you want to go, and because they may still be trying to figure out whether or not you were their actual fare, they may take you where you're going. So you can alter the route of where that vehicle is going versus where that vehicle was originally programmed thinking it was going. And so life experiences and the food that you put in your body can literally tell your DNA that I know you were designed to do this and designed to do that, and that's what you're supposed to do, but I'm going to give you some new instructions. It's almost like someone giving you a recipe, and then I take your recipe and I modify how you combine the ingredients. And as I modify how you combine the ingredients, logic would suggest that you're going to have a different outcome based upon what that recipe was originally designed to do. Now, as you see highlighted here in red, the red highlight does not change the structure or position of the DNA, but the instructions can determine what you are going to do. Now, can you imagine something being so insidious that throughout your daily living, things like this are introduced into your body and introduced into your brain, and as they're introduced into your body and into your brain, they can literally alter the way you navigate life. To give you an example, when Dr. DeGrue was talking a little while, when she was referencing a little while ago in her book, have you ever seen people do dumb crap over and over again, adults, and you ask them why they did it, and they'll say, I don't know what came over me. You know, I just don't know what came over me. And then you see other people and they say things like, I was a little tipsy then, or I had smoked a blunt, I ate some food that didn't agree with me. Because your brain assumes that what you put in your mouth, you've already made a decision about whether or not it's good for you. But the way we modify your epigenome, i.e., we refer to it as epigenetics, is we do things to you and you are not even aware that those things are being done to you. And we do these things to our children all the time. Like you could be trashing a companion and your child could hear you. Or you could be trashing someone on the phone and your child could hear you. Or you could be talking to one of your girlfriends or one of your male friends about the mother of your children or the father of your children, and the child hears you. And the child may not verbalize anything because depending upon how you socialize your children, they may have been socialized to, as I stated before, mind your own business. And even if they ask you a question about some of the things they've observed you're doing, you may say, look, I'm grown. I pay the bills around here. And so you're shutting the child down. And so when you shut the child down, that information goes inside of that child's head. And guess what that child is inclined to do? Particularly the kids today. They will go online and look stuff up. And a lot of times the algorithms online are not designed to present a positive light of melanin dominant people anyway. So if you go online and talk about fathers incarcerated, the algorithm may guide them to the number of African American men that are caught up in industrial prison complex and then produce a summary of the kinds of things that they have been convicted of, and the child might believe it. And nowhere in that algorithm would it say, you find a disproportionate number of brown and black people incarcerated because the system of racism and white supremacy is designed to funnel people through the industrial prison complex to create an atmosphere in their households that they will not be able to nurture and they will be unavailable. And as a result, their spouses may become inflamed and incensed with anger and entertain other men that they think will help them in the household, which will confuse the crap out of the child. And while that child is learning all of this information out of context or being exposed to it, it is literally modifying their brain. And as a result of the modifications of the brain, it modifies how they navigate life. So the summary, i.e., self-destructive behaviors, this is something Baba Anaya Akbar put in place many years ago when he talked about black people not having a sense of identity. And the reference was African Americans who, upon encountering the brutality and dehumanizing thrust of Western oppression, have struggled to adjust and survive this unnatural condition in the best way they knew how, usually faulty and destructive ways. So they actually engaged in things that are not productive. Also, I'm sure you guys are old enough to have seen the original Superfly, all right? And the original Superfly, the brother Curtis Mayfield hooked him up with a nice track. But one of the themes in Superfly was Superfly, and at that time in the 70s, Superfly was just trying to get $1 million so he didn't have to sell drugs anymore. He wanted to get $1 million to get out of that life. Are you following me? And that was what was considered to be a substantial amount of money at that period of time. But the point was, in those days, black people or melanin dominant people were happy to get a job at the post office, a government job. And now what's going on in society is you're hearing all these conversations about people losing their jobs in the government because this crap's happening to vanilla people, so-called white folk, all right? And this is new to them, all right? That doesn't mean that you're not finding a number of melanin dominant and brown people also being cast aside by the government. But in a few moments, I'm going to share with you how those things are rekindling those genetic memories that when people sat on, because when you're in work environment and you got that quote unquote direct deposit going on every day, you learn to stay in your place. You learn to just sit there and go with the flow, pretend everything is okay. And then when the stuff hits the fan, you're like, hold up, I know they didn't do that to me. And then you go and then you get polarized in your issues, and the vanilla brothers and sisters get polarized in their issues, but your story doesn't make the news. Their story makes the news. And then you get frustrated with the fact that their story is making the news, and you may say things like this with the separation, i.e., I've been working here for 14 years, and I got moved away first, and this person just started working here 2 years ago, and they're still there, and they say they're going to move them out a little bit later. And I can share with you later when we chat about it. All this crap is by design. I don't need to repeat this slide. I don't necessarily need to repeat this slide, but I do need to bring to your attention that your Asian brothers and sisters have not forgotten how to connect with their ancestors. They have not forgotten. Even, I mean, you could go to certain places in Japan, and they might call it B Town, where you find some Asian brothers trying to lock or spinning, like in terms of American dollars, like maybe 200 plus American dollars, 180 euros. Well, they don't use euros in Japan, um, but they may be spending their currency comparable to what I'm referring to, because most of us are familiar with American currency. You would find people spending all kinds of money to try to be more like you. You would find them doing things with their cars, like drifting and things, to be more like some of your Asian, your Latino brothers from the West Coast, and designing their cars to do the exact same thing. So why am I telling you this? Energy goes around the globe, and melanin dominant people are the most admired people on the planet. But you know what? The irony of the admiration, they are the most envied people on the planet. And because they're the most envied and simultaneously admired people on the planet, they oftentimes find themselves trying to figure out how do they fit in the fabric of what's happening in the universe. I would want to remind you, do not forget what Dr. Frances Cress Welsing's thesis has always been. From her tutelage or her alignment and apprenticeship with Brother Neely Fuller. You know it, I'm going to say it. If you're white, you're all right. If you're brown, stick around. If you're yellow, you're mellow. And if you're black, get back. And those things are literally tied to how much pigment you have in your skin. And sadly, we do the crap to this day to our children. We may not be aware of it, but we may say, oh, I know that boy's going to do well in school. Look at him. He got pretty light skin and he has good hair. And then we'll say something similar to our daughters, you know. Well, girl, you know, you kind of chocolate, a little hippie there, and you got big lips. So you're going to have to like do some things a little different to get a quote unquote good man. I'm talking about people today in the 21st century still talk to their children this way. They literally still talk to their children this way. And Spelman College, probably 70 years ago, yeah, probably 70 years ago, they had to pass the paper bag test, which means they needed to be kind of really fair to get into the school. What I'm trying to make you aware of is these things don't go away, and they tag your genetic memory. And when they tag your genetic memory, those things, they linger there and they stay there. And if something lingers inside of you and you don't flush it out, it festers. And when it festers, it's going to create damage. And you cannot pretend that that damage is not there when you look at how our children are navigating life. So I think I'm going to like hit about 5 slides, pause, so we can have some questions and comments, and then I'll zoom through slides that may relate to whatever you're bringing up. What I'm talking to you about now is literally cultural hegemony. Cultural hegemony, in a nutshell, simply means that you can see this page where there isn't anything included because it's been taken from the books. And on the left, you see all the scribble representing the European history. That's what has happened to us during our socialization. That's what happened in school. That's what still happens in school. Even to this day, we are going to have to engage in an overt battle to tell these people, you cannot stop us from talking about the system of racism and white supremacy. Because you find educated people still concerned about rocking the boat. And the way they do it is they will fund the research to study what these particular individuals endorse under their rubric of European history, which is a version of this history, which is actually 90 damn percent full of lies. And the people here, their story doesn't get told. And because the story doesn't get told, no one is reading it. And when they do come across it, it's kind of like a novelty. And those people that are exposing them to it, they're outside the box. And people will say, like I stated earlier in this presentation, I'm about to get in trouble. But it's my job to stay in trouble. That's my mission parameter. I am designed to be in trouble. And trouble means when you share things to allow your people to become mindful of what they need to do to become empowered. These people, they don't smile upon that. Do any of you guys remember? I think it was Michael Jordan. He may have had a little share in the Charlotte Hornets, but I think he was trying to buy something and plugged into a major franchise for the NBA. And some of you probably don't even realize that Bill Cosby was trying to recruit some people to actually buy a whole network. And some weird stuff started happening to him. So I'll show you slides on that if we have time. So this is the thesis, and this is exactly what we're talking about at this very moment, from the womb to the tomb, and how Europeans have socialized us to believe other than what is really the truth. Literally, pay close attention. The system of white supremacy is now the taboo topic in education. If you were to look at the people that Donald has around his table, Trump has surrounded himself with people that pretty much embrace what he embraces. And I don't know why melanin dominant people are confused about the individual that is the executive for Tesla, because that individual was born in Pretoria. And his father's a bona fide, diehard, reluctant to even acknowledge out of his mouth that apartheid should be gone. I don't need to tell you guys about Mandela, what was happening in Pretoria, what happened throughout that part of the world. You guys have a digital apartheid in the United States of America. You have a kind of colonization that colonizes the mind of people. Now, what does they have to do with this slide? You see these kids? For the record, I want you to know, these children here, they represent Europeans, and their hegemonic approach creates fear and confusion on any topic or people they want to delete. And you know that's the word that Elon used, and it was talking about shutting down certain divisions in the government. Delete is terminology that you use when you're talking about computers, when you're talking about zeros and ones, when you're talking about codes, when you're talking about closing programs, or deleting programs, removing files, taking them out of the trash can and completely getting rid of them from your platform. That's the language that was used. We need to delete this. We need to delete that. So when you look at the little people that I have highlighted here, they represent the little minions that are pretty much identified as savants, right? You all need to let Pamela in, okay? I guess I can admit it. So when you process it, look at these kids. They don't even know what this is. They have a stick trying to figure out a branch. What is this? They are absolutely, totally confused. But note how they all have their devices near them. Are you following me? And this child behind this child obviously is very leery, and they're like, what the hell is this? We don't read anymore. We don't read to our children anymore. I have a friend that would ask me periodically, I have some books in my devices, right? But oftentimes I have a paper book when I'm reading, particularly when I'm traveling. I had one smart pro-black sister to say to me when I was going to a conference on the plane, she says, you could put all those things in your phone, and you wouldn't even have to have those books in your backpack here. You could put them in your phone. And I said to her, are you aware of how profoundly important it is to be able to touch a page, turn the page, smell the book, see the stuff in print, as opposed to me putting it in my phone? She said, well, that's just old school. Like, you old school anyway. And I say, yeah, I am old school. And I do have a number of books on my phone. But when I want to read something, enjoy what I'm reading, I may be inclined to embrace the content based upon what's available to me, that I can see, that I can hold. So I'm going to have you guys to process a slide in a second. When I ask you to process this slide, I'm going to be reminding you that though this is 2025, I'm sure you guys know about that incredibly large document that was supposed to represent what the current administration was going to lay upon people in 2025. And I don't want you to be so naive to think that he wrote it. There were a whole group of quote unquote reasonably paranoid, greedy, vanilla brothers and sisters behind closed doors creating that comprehensive narrative for 2025.
Verified. Gloria Portsmouth 1-240-828.
Your mic is open. I want you guys to look at this slide. I'm going to be completely silent and quiet, though I will not have my my audio turned off, but I'm going to cover something up. And I want you to process what I placed before you. And I want you to give a little thought to what you see here. And what you see here is going to intimately be tied to everything that we will be discussing as we move on. The psychology of racism, how the system of white supremacy, the virus, undermines our collective humanity. I want you to take 3 minutes to think about that. And whatever turns over in your head, when I start talking to you again, I want you to be candid, because that's going to be our segue into the slides that come. My lips are going to be sealed for 2 times 90 seconds. Look at it carefully. Anyone ready to verbalize? I think I have audio because I didn't turn it off. Anyone ready to verbalize? I speak up about what you see.
Yes, my brother. We're speaking here of, I'm assuming, since we're going as a historical view of psychology, that what has been happening using rats as for experimentation on behavior is that
What?
the people who were doing this considered
Oh, okay.
they use white rats and not black rats. Well, is there something about that in racism? They did not. They even assumed that rats would be black rats or blacks or rats of other color, brown, etc., were less intelligent than the white rat. Am I making sense?
You making sense. I'm gonna respond to you in a second. I want to see what anyone else has to say.
I would,
Go ahead,
I
Mama Tindai.
okay, I would think, can you hear me?
Cindy, go ahead. Just give a little bit more volume.
Okay, because I have my earplugs, let me take them off. What I'm getting to is that under this
Her audio dropped.
You need to unmute, Mama Tenda.
Tende, your audio dropped. Tende, your audio dropped.
Okay, under the system of white supremacy, anything of significance is white. Anything of impact is white. what I mean by anything of significance, that's what I mean, even the rat. So anything that has any impact or any importance in the universe has to be identified with being white. Anything other than that is lesser.
Asante Sana, Shukran. Thank you, my sister. Anyone else have a comment they'd like to share?
Yeah, I think about how back, if you listen to some of the medical and psychological discussions about race, about the slaves in the 17, 1800s, how they effectively used the spoken word as well as the writings to quote unquote paint a false psychological narrative of the inferiority of the slaves versus the white men and women. So it's when you think about someone the virus, is that they're programming the group speak code script to promote false doctrines or false ideologies that has no scientific basis, but they're using the neocolonialism to quote unquote to justify the treatment of people who are non-white, to treat them less than human.
You are rocking. Anyone else before I comment? And for the record, I don't want you guys to entertain the thought that this is quote unquote incorrect, correct, right or wrong answers. This is a continuum of us engaging in dissecting the symbolism. And for the record, I think I may have shared with you that this was the original cover of the book. I added these borders, and obviously those words were not on it. It was literally, even the rat was white, black background with Dr. Robert Guthrie book. And I think this particular version was dropped in 79. All right. Now he's making it very clear. Like you were saying, Coach, you were pointing out a little while ago, Baba Mosi, uh, that they didn't do this and do that with black rats. Let me give you a piece of information about this thing about these rats being chosen. White rats typically were in the labs for a lot of reasons because they were more easily trained and they would breed them. You couldn't take those rats from the city in the hood and put them in there because they were feral. They were wild rats. So they even, this is what I mean about the research. And the irony of it is the research literally was inherently biased because they chose a species of rats that were among the most docile rats that they could do the research on. And they still use a lot of white rats. Every now and then you find other rats, but typically they'll use a lot of white rats. But back to what Tunde was pointing out, it's literally exactly that. Anything worth discussing relating to human interaction, worth being looked at. And you even find black people telling you over, when I say black, I'm talking about people that were trained in these institutions. You need to publish, or you need to do some research. Then you have to remind them that the research that typically is real meaningful research, there are very few arenas that will be recognized as peer-reviewed journals for black and brown people that publish their research. They have to do their own thing. Now, you can publish, but as far as somebody giving you money to do research on what you want to do research on, that's when you're going to find yourself jumping through a whole bunch of hurdles because they fund things that they would like to further expand on. And like I said, we're going to use this slide to take a dive into the next slides that are coming up. So all of your answers are clearly on point. And this little book became the foundation, and everywhere I go, you can see me, so you can see 2010, the right corner, when I actually put this African border around it before Mac came up with new versions of software, and you could only use Canva to do all the modifications or a special type of software to modify what you wanted to modify because we had too much power with these self-publishing programs to create what we wanted to create. And the irony of that book leads to this book. And book actually comes from a Greek or the Latin, well, it comes from the Greek word biblios. Biblios means book. And the irony of biblios is the word book because that's what biblios means. And I remember a few years ago, or maybe a decade ago, Whoopi Goldberg came out with a book called Book. And she just named it Book. But if you ask any melanin dominant person living in the United States of America, even some Muslims, you may say, do you have a holy book in your house? They will say, I have a Quran, and I have a Bible, if they have a Bible. But they may say, I have a holy book, I have the Quran. You talk to some people in those South Set Society, they may tell you they have the Metal and they have access to the holy tablets. But what I'm getting at is this is just another book. It doesn't in any way demean the content. I'm telling you it's a book. But I'm using it because you find people that are well trained, rather than them thinking, they literally would say it's God's word and it's God's will because it's in that book. And they'll also tell you that if you want to be knowledgeable, you need to do what? Immerse yourself in this book, read some scripture, give your life to, quote unquote, the God whom they have identified to make masculine. And they also, just throughout that particular narrative, they say some pretty jacked up things about women, okay? From the beginning of, like the Adam and Eve line. But the whole thesis that I'm trying to get you to understand is we are programming your brain every day, and we program your brain. We can program you so consistently that we can have your genes to turn on you. And when your genes turn on you, you have literally told yourself that you are willing to slowly self-destruct by overly engaging in alcohols, drugs, to some degree promiscuity, burying all your thoughts in a place where you don't have to think, in codex or narratives like this, and simultaneously telling your children that if they don't get in line and follow whatever the codes were that they're exposed to, a very good example would be not even code switching, but you find black people telling other black people in professional arenas, brother, you're not able to. I don't think you should really talk like that. You need to sound a little bit more European. You all ever heard of this before? Have you all ever heard of this before?
Yes, Baba.
And they tell you, even
Heard,
to, go ahead.
but I'm in your environment and I always wore African clothes. And when I would speak afterwards, my own folks would say, "Oh, you're so articulate." So I would ask them, "Do the clothes make you inarticulate?"
Keeping it real. I have a couple of colleagues, and I don't overtly tease them in their face because I don't think they can handle it. And they are they're not in my discipline per se, but they are in the area that relates to social sciences. And I'm always amazed to see how pro-black they are at conventions, wearing all the traditional African clothing. And then when I see them in a work setting, they hardly ever have any garments that speak to their identity. They may have a pin, you follow me? But they are straight-laced, mainstream people, and they really do think that they are basically delivering content that relates to natural ethos or African ethos. And every now and then I'll crack on one of them, and I'll say something like, "So you wear your kente when we having a special event, or you talk about things that melanin dominant people have done in February." And I do this crap religiously all the time. And they tell me, "Well, brother, you kind of radical. It's like you've always been outside the box." That's because where I was socialized, brown and black people, we grow in spirals and we do things in circles. We deal with spheres. We don't deal with square boxes. So it's by our nature that we're always outside the box. And the irony of it is when we try to put our children in a box, they rebel. And when they rebel from their box, we have the audacity to say they are out of control, as opposed to giving them guidance. And when we don't give them guidance, they seek guidance from their peers on the street who also are not receiving any guidance. And when you don't have guidance, National Geographic did a study about 35 years ago, and that study that they did was intimately tied to what was happening with the young elephants, because the Vanilla brothers that were poachers and hunting, taking all the ivory, they had killed the great bull elephants, and the young elephants didn't have anyone to teach them what elephants do. So the elephants were like goring rhino. They were killing everything. And they actually established gangs because they are smart. And they were running all over the place doing all kinds of things like a bunch of misdirected young children would be doing. And the reason I say young children, because throughout the planet, when you stop being a child, you're an adult. They have rites of passage for it. Americans have this crap they call teenagers, right? And adolescents. I could talk to you about how the brain develops during that period of time, but I'm going to save it. But let's move forward to something else. I won't go into this in detail because we know I just told you that's what they do to us to control us. And I don't know what the status of the Pope is now, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were generating different colors of smoke in the next few months about the Pope choosing another cardinal because that brother's health is up and down on a roller coaster. But I'll say something to you that I don't usually engage in. This is a sign of the times. United States of America was the new Rome. Rome has begun to fall. And as Rome is falling, it's a little bit like the character that you saw in Django. You remember when, what's the brother's name? Samuel Jackson was playing the house, quote unquote, Negro, and he was trying to save the home in the whole 9 yards. And his whole thesis was revolving around everything he had been trained to do to protect the quote unquote good old white folk and the good old white folk master, right? Because that's what was in his head. And he was tripping out when he saw Django come in on his horse. And people don't know that that horse actually belonged to Jamie Foxx. That was Jamie Foxx's horse. You follow me? And if you were to have a conversation and read up a little bit, you find that Jamie Foxx kind of dropped the bomb and said that's how he got the part because he had his own horse and they kind of impressed. What's his name? Quentin Tarantino. How do you pronounce his last name? Now I digress to make a point. The point that I'm making is when you have autonomy and a sense of self and identity, you draw attention at three levels. One level is fundamental curiosity, like when the sister was saying she's always dressed up in garments that literally reflect who she is in her consciousness. And then you run into a few black people and sometimes vanilla people because you can code switch. You know how to use these people's vernacular and communicate the way they communicate. And then you can turn to the left and have a conversation with somebody and drop a real serious conversation in Ebonics. And they will admire you, and then they might even ask you later, well, why do you talk like that if you can talk this way? And you can say, I'm just trying to keep it real and blah, 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 staying true to who I am. And one of the things that has literally wrapped us all up is this particular book. And when they put this book in the hands of someone that speaks well, and maybe he can sing and hit a note every now and then, we turn our people into sheep. And as a matter of fact, they even use the language. I have to basically shepherd my flock. And they use metaphors like that. And if you were in a flock, you're probably going to do what everybody else does in the flock. And if you pay attention, you see these zombies in the background here. All right? I told you guys about this, so I'm not going to go into details around it. But I do want you to know that they started off by literally allowing us to think that we could never be a 10. And you know, a 10 is like you're almost perfect. It's like 100%. Because they started off by telling you that if you don't show up pink and pale and rosy, then you're going to get 2 points deducted from you. All right? And this is the scale that they use so that you can have clarity on it. And as you can see, just so you would know, I'm not making it up. The Apgar scale was in place in the mid and late 50s. And this is what they use. As you can see, you got a 2 if your entire body was pink. All right? Now, you got a 1 if the body was pink and extremities were a little blue. Now, I know they're talking about oxygen saturation, but brown babies, sometimes they're born dark, they get fairer. Sometimes they're born fairer and they get darker. You follow me? And as they got into the 60s, they decided to kind of look at the palms and the bottom of their feet. But the bottom line is, if you were not trained, you did not know. And as they say, like if you were 8 to 10, good, normal, blah, 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 blah. But just because you were good, I don't need to tell you, black and brown people have always had to be what? Super bad, extra good, extremely talented, really excelling in whatever they've done. And all their crap is by design. And this is what happens to our children. How many of you all know of people or knew people that right after Indigenous Peoples Week or month, i.e. around the time that they call Thanksgiving, usually they start getting ready for it after All Hallows Eve, you would find brown and black people Christmas shopping. And whenever they had brown dolls around, oftentimes the brown dolls would sell out so quickly. And parents, oftentimes before they had brown dolls, they only had little white dolls. And sometimes parents really did want to get their kid a brown doll, but they didn't have any brown dolls. And sometimes their children were so well programmed from looking at television that they thought the brown dolls were ugly. Are you guys familiar with what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
Yes, because I remember my sister had a dog, the Chrissy doll, the one you could braid her hair back in this late 60s.
Mhm. But what's so profound about it is what brown people don't understand. Vanilla people, because of the misogyny, they treated their women badly too. As a matter of fact, they still say it. A man's best friend is his dog. You follow me? And I'm trying to say to you that you need to tune in to what this does to a child. Look at this child. She's holding, she's grasping her forehead. And all these things create mental health problems in our children because you don't know what's inside of your head. And one of the reasons you don't know what's inside of your head is because your parents don't help you navigate the things that your head is exposed to when you go out into the world. And a lot of your parents are also confused. And they're confused because they fail to realize what Dr. Frances Cress Wilson always talks about, the system of racism and white supremacy. She spoke, a matter of fact, you guys know what happened to her when she was at Howard. When she dropped that crest-theory color confrontation and white supremacy, Howard told her she needed to get out of there. She needed to leave. And I think when Dr. Wilson left Howard, she was an assistant professor and she's a psychiatrist. She would never be allowed to get tenure. She didn't never move up to the associate status because the ranking order stated if you were pro-black about anything that empowered black people, you were in trouble. So when you look at what's going on with kids here, you see all these little white dolls, of course you would be confused. Any of you all remember a movie that Richard Pryor was in called Bustin' Loose?
Mm-hmm.
And he was helping this little Asian sister, Vietnamese girl do things. He was helping these people in this special school. He was really involved, helping them, very involved. And this child was actually someone that was being socialized in the United States because her parents were Vietnamese. And she figured that she needed to give Richard some sex because he was polite and kind to her. And Richard's character was like, hey, hold up, I'm not trying to have that with you because that's the way they were socialized during the times of the war of what women had to do in order to be accepted by the men. And you have women doing that still today in Hollywood. And when I say they're doing it, I don't mean they're literally doing it. I mean, that's the stereotype. And women would drop that stereotype on other women. So I guess you had to sleep your way to the top. Or I guess you had to sleep your way to get this particular role in this movie. Because these people objectify people and translate their value. The Donald just did it today to one of their own people. Look, if you give us this because you owe us this, your money, and your people are actually dropping off the planet because you're at war. And the thing about it that's so strange is, if you guys will pay attention, when that war first broke out in Ukraine or the Ukrainian people, they basically were like leaving brown and black people behind that were there studying and doing things. They claimed they didn't have any room for them on the train to get them out of there. All right? So when I told you America is turning on itself, Rome has begun to fall. She's eating herself. And the metastasis of the cancer of the system of racism and white supremacy has begun to metastasize with such frequency, and it's just running all over the planet that this country is beginning to find that they are receiving the wrath of the universe. So, Veritas Sabrosa, the truth beneath the rose. And what was the brother's name with the full lips that was the congressman? He walked with Bill Cosby. No, he walked with Martin Luther King. What's his name? What's the little brother's name? They cracked his head open. It was going across the bridge. I think they were in Mississippi. It's not that this is a quote unquote history lesson for you, because he had that statement. He would say, "It's time for good trouble."
Good trouble, yeah.
And I'm telling you now, anytime you start telling the truth to these people, you're getting in trouble. And oftentimes the trouble that you get into is by people that look like you. And that's why I was so pleased when I found this particular Pinocchio variant of a hypodermic on the nose. And there's a lot of information I'm hiding in here to share with you about you being lied to. And you're being lied to about fundamental things, which is literally coming from this chief of hegemony. The dominant culture controls everything you do, and they have tentacles and everything. And I remember when I found this albino octopus imagery to highlight for you this particular thing here, that they were to make a transformer, a real transformer, they should have used an octopus. Because as big as they are, they can relax themselves and get into some of the tiniest places and come back to their regular size. It's almost they do like Elastigirl in the Incredibles. But they have their hands in everything. And the place that they have their hands is most detrimental to melanin dominant people. They have their hands inside of the heads of your children. And this is a perfect example. Now you see this particular slide, you see these kids that are dressed up nice and neat. The little boy hair is in order. This child has their hair braided. And look, they're playing on ground where they placed, quote unquote, something in the soil and public housing. Do not play in the dirt or around the mulch. Environmental Protection Agency, they've done something to this land. Now, I mean, this sign is actually there, and these kids are playing in it. Trust me, these kids are beginning to get brain damage. And how can we retrain and refocus our kids? We have to start making some decisions about what music we're going to make available to our children in the home, because you oftentimes don't have control of what they're listening to outside of the home. But you can, if you have a relationship with your child, ask them to like share a few things with you from their playlist. Every now and then when I'm in the city, I will literally drive through places where I can hear some of this rap music that these guys are playing. And I say to you, it's not because I'm older, but 85% of the crap that I hear literally fits the term crap. It's nonsense rhymes, usually filled with a lot of colorful language that demeans black people and brown people. And the baseline is so strong that it undermines your ability to tune in to what's happening cognitively. So you sort of repeat it via rote memory, and you don't really have a clue in terms of what these things really mean across the board. And that's how we rewire your brain. And rewire your brain, because one of the most nurturing outlets that melanin dominant people have always had, our music. And if Beyonce had not dropped Cowboy Carter, almost all of the people in the country western community would never know that the banjo was developed by black people. They would never know that creating the kinds of tunes that you call country music were originally developed by black people. Literally. And I got to go back to Charlie Pride to talk to you about it. I'm talking about they developed this particular genre of music, and then you can meet a lot of conscious melanin dominant people and they like country music. And then you find other black people saying, oh, you listening to country? Country is nothing but rap tuned to another tone, tuned to another beat, lined up a little bit like some stuff that you would associate with old school rhythm and blues. They're telling stories. And you are being pushed out of the arena. So the food, let's see where we need to go now. Why don't we pause and take some questions? Because the big picture is what I'm sharing with you now is we are turning our people into the walking dead. In the walking dead, you convince yourself that you can be dead and appear to be alive with drugs, the wrong kind of food. And then when you actually lose a loved one, you might make a t-shirt at most. A few people still will make an altar. A few people will still literally create a place setting at the table when those people have crossed over. A few people will burn incense for them, burn a candle for them, do special rituals for them around things that they're liking to let them know that they want to acknowledge that their spirit is still welcome, the spirit is still with them, so that they can actually relax and accept the fact that they're crossing over during the 40 or 49 days, depending upon what your beliefs are. But we have lost our way. And we've lost our way because the only thing that we do that's remotely close enough to acknowledging when we lose a loved one is we call it a home-going ceremony. But after we send them home, rarely those among us that are still incarnate do things to let their spirit know that they have not been forgotten. We don't burn the incense. We don't put the whatever it was that your aunt or uncle prefer to like. We don't pour libation for. When I say we, I don't mean the few conscious people that do. I'm saying that we have literally disconnected ourselves from our ancestors. And the more you do that, the more you're going to become a spook on asphalt. You will be among the walking dead. And trust me, your kids, they know. They watch you. They pay close attention to you. They watch you when you go to church. They watch you when you come home. They watch you when you budget to buy certain foods. They watch you go to your slave particular position every day and come home and yell at them and take it out on them. They watch you. They pay attention to you. And the more you disconnect from your children, the more you are unintentionally creating enemies in your own household. I put this here so I can end for us. This is what you hear from the Democrats. And the irony of the Republicans have the elephant. And this is what the Democrats have done to you, us, God knows, for I don't know how many decades since they were, quote unquote, allowing brown and black people to actually vote. And don't think they gave it to you. There were a whole bunch of people lynched in the Deep South, got caught up in the crossfire so that you could actually vote. But the irony of what I'm about to tell you is this donkey here, also known as a jackass, let's talk about it until the next election. Let's talk about it. And you can see the elephant, the great elephant. But check this out. This particular donkey, this donkey is actually expired. This donkey is playing dead. MAGA, oh mon Dieu. I mean, I shouldn't be put French in there, but oh my God, right? And the Democrats are panicked. It's like you got Congress and Senate. They said, well, we're outnumbered. Where in the hell is the Congressional Black Caucus? Why have they not taken a stand? All those members of the Congressional Black Caucus could have introduced a moratorium, taken out a page in the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, the LA Times, the Amsterdam News, and the big paper, I've forgotten the name of one in ATL in Atlanta. Why haven't they taken a position to say A, B, C, D? I'm talking about the Congressional Black Caucus. Why hasn't the NAACP or the Urban League made a statement about what they think is going on? And they'll say, well, you know, we're Democrats, we're working on it. And this is why I put this in front of you. It's very symbolic. Let's talk about it until the next election. And that's why people don't trust these particular people. We don't trust them. Let me show you this child. You all ever seen her before? Faith Odunsi, all right? 15-year-old who defeated China, UK, and the US in historical global open mathematics competition in 2021. Did you all see her being interviewed on CNN News, MSNBC News? Did you see her on television explaining all the things she did, why she was such an incredibly gifted mathematical genius? Do you know we would not even be able to talk online if it wasn't for this sister here? You would not have Zoom, you would not have WebEx, because this is the engineer. I know she's born in 55. Engineer Marion Croak, all right, has worked on advancing voice over internet protocol technology, converting voice data into digital signals that can be easily transmitted over the internet. She put this stuff in place. She's the reason why you can talk on Zoom and on WebEx. This sister hooked it up. She hooked it up. And I'm not implying just because we don't know who she is, I'm telling you the American media is not going to disseminate who she is. So if we don't teach our own and guide our own, don't be angry with your child when you see that child that you thought you knew carjack somebody that's in their early 50s or late 60s just to have a joyride, or smack them across the head with a Glock, or colloquially speaking, bust a cap in their knee, or take them off the planet, and then you say, oh my God, our kids are so violent. We don't feed them right. We don't give them lap time. We don't engage them because we're too preoccupied trying to figure out how to handle the system of racism and white supremacy as individuals, and or we're either wrapped up in the church or what we believe in, or we're getting high or having sex to try to cope with the madness, while these two sisters here have already dropped all the information these folk need to genetically engineer and modify your genes beyond you just learning, being socialized. They've created something called the CRISPR that they can actually go inside of your genetic material and slice it, cut it up to do exactly what they want to do to it. And Dr. Charpentier and Dr. Dunat realized that they could synthesize a piece of RNA that targeted and chopped up not just a spot on a viral gene, but on any gene. The reason why I'm telling you this is because even when they did it as Nobel laureates, they were told and they thought that they were going to do this to, create medicinal protocol utilizing genetics. It never crossed their mind that that's what these folk were going to do, reinvent what dropped in 1968. And this brother that wrote this book is a specialist in butterflies, all right, an entomologist. This particular brother, Paul Ehrlich, this is what he dropped in 68. This one was dropped in the 80s, and he had the audacity to come back and retell us the same story in 2023, Life, a Journey Through Science and Politics, and the total objective is population control. And what you may not see is happening right now before your eyes, because it's too many quote unquote brown people, according to the US, looking at your Latino brothers and sisters populate the planet. And so as a result of that, this is what they were worried about from 2050. By 2050, the population of your planet in US of A will be primarily melanin dominant people. And in order to curtail that phenomenon from manifesting, these folk have decided to do exactly what they did to the First Nation people here, 1492 up to 1977, and it's less than that now in 2025, because you find your First Nation brothers and sisters, if you don't see relics in the museum, they're on quote unquote reservations with a casino, with 60% of them probably struggling with diabetes and heart disease, and the women, the girls disappearing left and right, and nobody is giving a damn about looking for them and finding them. And this is the same thing that happened right now on that part of the world to keep me from dropping meta tags. I won't even say the word, but you can see what happened in 46, 47. And by the way, the more yellow you see, the more the land has been taken. And this is what was left. And you already heard my boy say they want to turn that into a place where people can go and relax and chill, and tell all these people they either need to move to Egypt, go somewhere, but they need to get out of there. So do humans value their offspring? Yes, they value their offspring, but people that are here and people that were here are identified as a problem, and they were actually classified to basically be deleted because they wanted to make room for these people. These people. And that's genetic engineering 2.0. This is genetic engineering 1.0. So the thesis that I'm leaving you with is, that's the key word. We want to control by eliminating this, preserving this, utilizing these particular instruments with one objective in mind: control the money, create mayhem, remove the melanin, and mass population control, so that we can create the ideal human offspring, and we can make them as perfect as we would like them, i.e. perfect. I'm not using that word to say they're perfect. I'm using that word to say to you, as they have highlighted here, what's wrong with perfect? Who has the nerve to say that this is perfect? I encourage you guys to look at, I have to send it to you. It's a reference that talks about creating designer children in the outer limits and what happened with the mistakes that they don't tell you about. And so this is a reminder. Black women, a black woman is 22% more likely to die from heart disease than a vanilla sister, 71% more likely to perish from cervical cancer, and 243% more likely to die from pregnancy. That's 2017. Look at the breakdown. See all the black up here highlighted in this dark blue? You see what's happening to your vanilla brothers and sisters? You see theirs down here? All right? But they'll give you the metric to say this is the total loss of life of women, that have lose their lives during delivery or what happens in pregnancy. They give you this metric to say this is what's happening. It's a real problem. But they don't tell you how the data is skewed and how the data is modified, because when you look at what I shared with you a little while ago, you see these people down here? And that's one of the reasons why they're gung-ho about getting them out of the US of A, gung-ho, because they are having a lot of offspring. and they're probably like maybe about, I say probably about 21% of the U.S. population, whereas African Americans might make up about 13%. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Yes, Doc. I have a question, which is something a little personal.
I don't mind you asking it. If I think it's really in the zone of being personal, I'll just answer
yeah.
it off the air.
Now, you know, when I was quite young, um, my hair spiraled tightly, and so much so that it might have been difficult to even comb with what is known as the comb, not the pick. Now that I've gone past what is collectively the average age of the African in the America, I've noticed that I've sometimes I have to say I've lost that spiral in my hair. I'm beginning to wonder from what you've said tonight, um, whether I'm subconsciously disassembling my DNA. So, what should, am I thinking something unusual here?
First of all, I have to make sure I understood what you said. Are you
Yeah,
saying that the natural spiral that's in your hair where the crown would be? Did you? I have to make sure I understood you.
it's straight. It has gone almost straight right now. Yeah.
Okay, so your question is, I was thinking that you were implying a bald, but you're saying your hair is getting straight. It's losing its
Yes,
coil,
it's
right?
it's the spiral. I'm losing the spiral, not the hair. So I'm losing some of the hair, but the spiral is what I'm concerned about.
Okay,
What you said
were
here
you,
tonight.
well, two things happened. I remember when my afro used to get wet in the pool and it would lay down in a way that I didn't want it to lay down back in the day. I mean, it would get wet instead of it kinking up like it was supposed to, i.e. supposed to. And I remember some bumping into some sisters back in the day when I'm swimming, and she's like, "Oh, I didn't even know you had good hair." I'm like, "Oh my God." My hair is wet, so-called good hair. So, but back to your question,
Yeah.
that probably is related to, I don't know what in your family lineage, but if you are constantly wearing kufus or keeping it covered, you follow me. And I don't know exactly what kind of shampoo you use, but the sebaceous gland in your hair, and as you get older, oftentimes your hair will lose its coil because your hair grows toward the sun. Melanin dominant people have coils. The brothers that were generating the narratives a long time ago, called from the people from Planet Risk or the Nibarian people, will tell you about the kink in the coil of your hair relating to your quote unquote genetic lineage. Other than me just speculating on that, I'd honestly have to take a deep dive into that because I can tell you now the sebaceous gland, like my hair is kind of platinum. You follow me? And I have to tell people it doesn't have anything to do with melanin per se, because your hair is pigmented. But of the members in my family, my other brothers and sisters who may be older than I am, they don't have as much gray as I do. That's a whole lecture, to be honest with you. And I could give you some information on it. It's going to come from science and dermatology, and the other information is going to come from some of those narratives that we don't really recognize. But the foundation statement that I can share with you in summary, it would have a lot to do with your diet. You follow me? Would have a lot to do with your diet. And diet add to your diet metabolism. Like if you're not like ambulating, moving around a lot, getting a lot more circulation to that part of your skull. And there are two main highways that lead to your skull. They're called your carotid arteries. One is on your left and one is on your right. Okay. And if they become a little um, occluded, then the level of circulation, not just on your scalp, but to your brain, um, you might lose a little bit of oxygen saturation. The last thing I want to say is you're probably not stimulating your scalp. By that I mean, like when you shampoo your hair, I doubt if you are inclined to shampoo your hair more than twice a week and actually stimulate your scalp. And if you're not stimulating your scalp, shampooing your hair, and feeding your hair, then your sebaceous glands are not going to produce as much oil as they used to produce. And if you keep your hair constantly covered up, your hair is not getting plugged into the sunlight. And everything I'm telling you now is pretty much a hypothesis until I can actually anchor it in science. But the hypothesis is built upon what we know about hair that grows out of the skull versus hair that grows out of your face.
Mm, okay. Well, it's
Does
something.
anyone? I'm honored that you have that much respect for what you perceive or project my breadth of knowledge to be. When it comes to the brain, I got you covered. I got
Uh-huh.
you covered. If it's inside the skull or tied to the central nervous system, I got you covered. If it's optimal functionality, I got you covered. If it's computer models related to neuromarketing in the brain, I got you covered. If it's development of the brain in children, I got you covered. But when we start talking about things like that, I have to take a deep dive on my own.
Well, it's only about what I'm wondering if I'm losing contact ancestral connection
I will say this to you.
by the loss of the spiral.
Did
So,
I did I did I give you one of my books?
yes, yes.
Yeah. I have a section in that book that talks about the spiral in the hair, and it's
Mhm.
a detailed review of how the hair coils and what it means and what it relates to. And there's also something in there a little bit about nutrition, but I actually addressed that in the book. But you're not losing your ancestral connection, um, because I'm pretty sure it may be, as you're implying, becoming kind of linear or straight there,
Mhm.
but by nature, your hair is coiled anyway. All right.
Okay. All
So
right. Thank you.
your antenna not getting to sleep on you. I tell
Yes,
people,
yes,
here's the joke. If you see an old school car aerial antenna, and if it's broken, if it's lying down, the reception for your FM radio is basically going to be damn gone. You ain't got no AM because they broke the antenna off, right?
uh-huh.
But the kind of antenna that really drives your ability to stay tuned to your ancestors is intimately tied to pineal calcification, the integrity of your pineal gland, because that's your Bluetooth, and it's inside of your head, and it's there. And the way you can use your own barometer to tell whether or not your pineal is offline very frequently, you will dream a lot less frequently, and you will find yourself a little bit more challenged to intuitively read people and tune in to what you pick up intuitively. And the way you will know that you're losing your intuitive acumen is you'll start trying to analyze a lot of stuff around you. Now, one of the confounds for that, I'm going to be very frank, one of the confounds of you being obsessed with analyzing everything will be whether or not you have a Mercury in Gemini or ascendant in Gemini, and you're going to just overly analyze every damn thing, okay? And I'm talking about when you were born, when you came on the planet.
Mhm.
Otherwise, your pineal gland is going to tune in if it's viable. And it should be like a tiny, juicy grape or about the size of a full blueberry and juicy. And if it's not like a blueberry or a little bigger and juicy, um, it's atrophying and it's drying up and it's beginning to become kind of crystallized like a garden hose has been left out in the sun for a few
Mhm.
summers. And then it's not going to work up to speed. So you won't be able to read people the way you ordinarily would read people. Does anyone else have a comment or a question? There's got to be about 21 plus hours now, 2120, something like that.
Yes, 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 indeed. So,
I have a question. Is this information helpful or beneficial? Because, me being in academia, you know, I don't have any way of knowing. Is this information helpful and beneficial?
Yes. I was at a networking function last night. It was interesting. You have all these 20-year-olds reading all these books written by Francis Cress Wesley, W. Du Bois, and some of the other books, and they are shocked that what's happened today happened back then is happening again.
See, that's where someone like yourself, the wisdom walker, when
Right,
you're around these people, you have to share with them. That's why I was pointing out that um, what's going on in the world today wouldn't even be in the news if we were not talking about melanin recessive people.
right,
Because one thing that the Donald is pointing out, the previous administration did give that guy almost like open checks. You feel me?
yeah.
For what they wanted to do among Ukrainian people. But
Mm.
but they didn't tell us that they were really trying to tap into the ores that are in that country and protect a few other things I'm not going to mention on this platform. The only thing you hear about is they'll say they're trying to get the minerals in the ore. They only talk to you about lithium, But that's important because you know your boy with his lithium batteries for his cars, it's really
Mm.
important for them to have access to those things. But I
Well,
suggest, let me say this to you,
thank you.
by 2026 spring, if they haven't done some foul things to this African brother, this brother has actually developed a type of electromagnetic pulse wave technology that cars can run on. And they don't need hydrogen and they don't need electricity. They can pick up the ambient energy in the air and redirect that ambient energy in the air and turn it into fuel for these vehicles to propel. I'm thinking somebody will either try to buy him out or shut him up.
Hey, Doc, the original reincarnation of the electric car back in the 1900s did not use any batteries. Tesla, when he developed the car, it didn't have no batteries, and he just took the energy out of the atmosphere.
Actually, that's what that brother is doing
Right.
that I'm telling you with these new cars. Now, so you have to understand two things, which you already understand. If these vanilla brothers and sisters can't figure out how to make some money on it, they won't be able to put it in the stock market and do some things. You all remember a stupid program used to come, a silly program used to come on American television probably about 20, 25 years ago, called Dinosaurs.
Yes.
And that little thing said, I'm the baby, and blah, 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 blah. And Fern, Rob, and the other dude. But the point was, um, I think it was Robbie had invented a form of um, thermal energy coming from volcanoes.
Hmm.
And in that particular in that particular story or that particular sitcom, that version, he had created a way to take the energy from volcanoes and run it to people's homes like we run electricity. And the people that were at the big company like Pepco, so to speak, they bought it from him for a small amount of money or some kind of general token money. And when they bought it from him, he had to agree to whatever it was they were giving him not to bring it up again. And you know what they did? Just like in Raiders of the Lost Ark, they put it in a warehouse and made sure that the people would never have access to it.
Yes.
Now, it's some things that we can have a fireside chat about, but I wouldn't dare talk about on a platform like Facebook because they
Right.
take stuff out of context and they run with it. But just remember what you see on the screen now. You see an ice blue with a lightning bolt, pineal or pineal intact,
Yeah.
80 to 98% of the time. And what you see in red is the pineal intact, 10 to 50% of the time. And that has to do with people's ability to connect with nature. It has to do with people's ability to see themselves and other people. And on the far left, you see that the Euro-American, Anglo-Saxon, Scandinavian, and Scottish people, they don't have that ability. Now, the previous president that was at 1600 Black Lives Matter Plaza, I made a comment about him giving this brother, the Ukrainian people, pretty much blank checks, but they would never say that to us, right? We pay taxes, and that was to basically engage one of their enemies. Now, as I recall, during World War II, somebody can help me if it dramatically changes. Russia was an ally of the United States of America, and Germany and Japan were the serious ultimate enemies during World War II. You follow me?
That's
But
true.
you can see how things are cycles, right? And so when you look at the cycles, I could tell you some stuff about it, but I don't want to go into detail about that. I want to talk specifically about how this relates to us talking about the brain and from the womb to the tomb. Brown people, black people, African people, just like you saw in the movie Black Panther, they would say it was called DUAT, duat. When you pass, you would meet your ancestors. You could talk to your ancestors. As a matter of fact, during the process of crossing for 40 or 49 days, your ancestors would greet you and welcome you to the crossing. And they
Yes.
would also assign and allocate to you resources if there was a need for you to have any kind of exchange with anybody that was left on the other side. They would school you and tell you how to do it. But Europeans tell you with that classic narrative that they kind of hide in Catholicism, if you were not really bad, you go to purgatory. All right? If you were really jacked up and didn't balance the scales of my aunt, you went to hell. You follow me? And if you were really great and good and polite and kind, then you go to heaven. But Africans knew that your energy had to be balanced and you had to make peace with your ancestors because they would be the ones to receive you. So, what I'm telling you is Africans, Polynesians, all brown people on the planet have always understood until they accepted that book that I showed you earlier. They knew that you could communicate with your ancestors. Do you all remember this movie that the Latinos made? I think it was it called Coco? Um,
I know what you're
movie about
talking about, where they have they celebrate their ancestors, and they have one day in which they were to visit their ancestors, and if you didn't remember your ancestor would disappear.
That's it, exactly, precisely. And they knew and they recognized that. And you would have to do, and the Asians are also acutely aware of that. When they have these shrines, they do things, they go and burn incense, they recite mantras. And if you ever go to any of the major Asian countries, you will see these, I'm going to call them a stupa, S-T-U-P-A. It's like something that might remind you of an obelisk or a technu, a monument. And they actually build these high places where you go and worship and you pray to your ancestors to let them know that you have not forgotten them. And that's something that's tied to Buddhism. But see, we've forgotten who we are.
But
As a
Baba,
matter
you
of fact,
know,
go ahead.
when you go into an Asian restaurant, you will see that where they have the little people sit up there and whatever. It's actually a shrine
Of
that's
course,
dedicated to their ancestors, and they pray throughout the day.
precisely. And they burn incense, they thank them. And
Yep.
all the things that black people used to do before we, as the last portion to say, before the white man came, we don't do anymore. And when people ask me over and over again, well, we're so smart and we're melanin and so much power, why is it that these people are in control? I'm like, you've forgotten your language. When you forget your language, you cannot talk to your people. I bet you everybody on this platform knows someone they went to high school with that had a name that was not on their birth certificate. It was their nickname. And that nickname was more characteristic of that person than whatever it was they were named. That nickname would describe that person's temperament. And they've answered to it. And sometimes, depending upon the school, they might put in quotes or parentheses that was a name they preferred to be addressed by. Because unfortunately,
That's me right now, Baba, Tendai. But I wanted to just add one little thing in terms of what you were talking about, the blank check that was given by this country. In truth, it wasn't a blank check, because what they were doing was paying the manufacturers in the United States who were making the military armament that was needed. They used our tax money to pay them, and then they sent the armament over to Ukraine.
I appreciate you specifying the details, but ironically, that's what I mean. It's because if you manufacture resources for a war, and you basically create money to base, it's almost like I got my brother doing all the work, so I'm going to present a visible check to you, but the check is to give you what you need to fight a war that I'm encouraging you to fight because I can spend more money to help my brother do what he's doing in this country, and simultaneously oversee whatever those resources are in their country that we don't want regular people to know about. And trust me, it's a lot more going on than people being concerned about lithium. You feel me? A lot more going on. And a generic one that I can reference for you would be coltan.
Yes.
Okay.
Because you also have to realize they're trying to make up for a lot of the African countries taking away the mineral rights of the Europeans. So now they have to now they're on a planetary scavenger hunt to find the resources that they need since they're being cut out.
Well, like I told you earlier, America is in a stumble now. She's stumbling. She's stumbling with inability to regain her balance. And you pay close attention to what you see in the media. Before the summer of 2025 is over, it's going to be some things happening, and they ain't got nothing to do with me prophesizing. It's some fundamental things that are going to happen. They're going to be completely in line with nature because you've heard expression before. You don't blank with Mother Nature.
That's right.
Right.
Thank you. I think at this time, if you are, if you don't mind, Doc, if you don't have anything else to add, that we can conclude. And if you have some last words, um,
My last words are Asante Sana. I say thank you so much for allowing me to come in and share my 2 cents worth. And like I say to you over and over again, you may have a few people at the party, but sometimes people will process the information when the party is over. And it is my hope that some of these seeds that are being dropped, people will water them on their own. Because I don't believe in just talking for the sake of talking. I make sure that I put specific things together to deal with certain subject matter. And I recognize that I'm literally a garden hose just sprinkling a little bit of water. And I don't claim to own any of the knowledge that I'm sharing with you.
thank you very much. Well, there it is. We have just heard, and we have just been educated from an educator, Dr. Rasayon, Dr. Niyana, KB Rasayon, also known as Brother Coco.
Exactly, Brother Coco.
Yes, and a neuroscientist, and we've covered quite a bit this evening, and that is why I would say to most of us, please review so that you can, allow the brain to accommodate a lot of this information, because you would need to review this. It's a lot, and we thank you so much, Brother Coco. And Brother Coco is an author as well. He has 2 books. One called Reality Check, a manual for the human octahedron and the mystery of melanin. And the other one, The Awakening, the title of The Awakening. Oh my God, the president is black. And I think you may be able to order these books directly from Dr. Coco.
Yeah, the website.
The website, yeah.
Eyes of Ma'at. EYESOFMAAT.com. Like
Eyes of Ma'at. Okay, that's from that website. We do appreciate everything that you've done for us here, meaning edifying. And we will be happy to have you again. And we know you've got the third of the series coming up next month. And we can't wait to hear you expound on all these things that, well, it's a brilliant mind. What else can I say? And we do appreciate you sharing with us your knowledge, your wisdom. So thank you very much, Dr. Coco. Thank you very much for all those who have been on with us this evening. We appreciate you coming on to the Freedom Friday Forum, coming to you from the Woodson Banneker Jackson Bay Division of the UNIA-ACL Rehabilitating Committee 2020. Here in Washington, D.C. We cover what is known as the third region as well, which is Virginia, Maryland, Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
And so, but then again, today, we can say we cover the universe because we are on Zoom, we're on Facebook, and it's not just an in-person lecture. This is going worldwide. And so thank you very much again. Brother Coco, until we meet again next month, that is, right? If I'm not wrong. And
oh yes, sir.
and we'll have another good time of stimulating the mind and the brain.
It'll be
And
my pleasure. I think I'm gonna specifically talk about dezombification.
dezombification. Okay, very good. Very good. So thank you again. Thank you all. Have a good night. I was about to say safe travels, but you don't have to leave and go anywhere. Safe travels on the internet.
Be well.
Know what goes on. All right. So, brother Harold, we're gonna close, but before that, let me just close with the motto of the UNIA: one God, one aim, one destiny, and additionally, for all those who believe in it, one Africa. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and good night.